Hello, and thank you for joining us once again for Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
And I'm Lincoln L. Hayes. This week we are discussing one of my favorite movies of all time, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Thank you, David, for adding this to this season.
My pleasure.
We were looking at season 2, and you said, are there any movies that you want to do? And I said, I would love to do a Western. And you said, cool. And then you put in The Searchers and The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, because you're just such a nice guy. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I think the first time I saw this was probably in college, although I may have seen it on television at some point in my life. But I didn't really watch it until a few years ago when I bought this in the trilogy box set of Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and Good, Bad, and the Ugly. And we actually covered it a couple years ago on my podcast, the What the Hell Are You Watching podcast, with my former co-host, Kyle Anderson. And it happens to be his favorite movie of all time as well. So we did the Dollar Trilogy for his birthday that year. But I didn't really pay attention to it until this viewing. We'll get into that, obviously. When was the first time you saw it?
We talked about when we talked about The Searchers, you know, my father was the Western guy when I was growing up, and me being the kid, I was more of the monster movie guy.
Yeah.
So we would always duel. We'd always go kind of back and forth. And I thought I hated Westerns. But strangely enough, like, you know, I'm sure I know my dad loves these movies, but he was more of a John Wayne guy, so those were the Westerns that were around when I was a kid. So when I was in high school, I decided to just off the cuff, just watch The Good and Bad, the Ugly. And I think in the same week I watched this and I watched The Wild Bunch, and I watched them both, and within 5 minutes of each one, I was like, oh, Quentin Tarantino really loves this movie.
Yeah.
And what strikes you right off the bat is it's not even a story, though the story is expansive.
And great.
And great.
Like, when you think about how specific and nuanced the story is, you're like, this shouldn't be in a Western. Like, it was uncharacteristic for a Western to be this expansive, this well written, and this well thought out. And
it's so, you know, it's a game changer in terms of, okay, this is what we think of as a Western. I'm gonna just boom, like I'm gonna destroy all of that and create my own form. Yeah. And it's so it's the perfect example of style, yet style with substance.
Yeah.
And like the whole, like just the music and the camera angles and the shots and the editing and everything all thrown together, and it's just it's so much, like it just makes you feel like you're just like, oh, this is the most badass movie ever, and I love it. It's so cool. Yeah. And that's what it was like as a high schooler watching it. It's like, oh my God, this is the coolest movie ever. There's guns and they shooting people, and
you're that typical high school kid who discovered The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So you're like, you guys, you have to watch this movie. You don't even know. You don't even know what cinema's about without this movie. Oh, high school kids are dumb.
Yeah. But then we grow up and we become us.
Yeah, and then you get a public access show. Speaking of Kyle Anderson, he lives in Los Angeles, so he obviously could not be our guest, but I asked him if he wanted to participate in this episode because I knew he loved this so much. He is a associate editor and a reviewer for Nerdist.com. He gets to watch a ton of movies and go to a bunch of cool stuff.
That's nice.
And yeah, he's a jerk. But he submitted a little audio clip for us to tell us what he thinks about The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. So let's give a listen to that.
Enjoy.
There are two types of people in this world, my friend. Those about to watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and those who are not. You folks are among the lucky ones, about to watch Sergio Leone's 1966 film, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. My name is Kyle Anderson, and I am absolutely thrilled to be able to talk to you about this film. It's my favorite movie of all time. This is the culmination of the Dollars trilogy, as it was known in the United States, or the Man with No Name trilogy, as it was later called. It's the third Western starring Clint Eastwood under the direction of Sergio Leone. Eastwood is essentially playing the same characters he did in the other two. However, if you've seen those movies, this movie is actually acting as sort of a prequel. You can visually see this as he is acquiring the pieces of clothing that become the Man with No Name kind of costume. The poncho, the hat, the cigarillo, all of these things he starts as the movie goes along losing his old clothes and getting new ones. The characters are all very important to the movie, obviously. This is a movie Leone set up to have the three characters, the three leads, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we start with the ugly, which is Eli Wallach's character, Tuco Ramirez. He is essentially our character. He's the one we spend the most time with. He has the most screen time. He sets it right away, like the first time we see him, he jumps out of a restaurant window, food hanging out of his mouth, and just looking a mess, and it says the ugly. He's got a litany of crimes that become part of an elaborate ruse that he and Clint Eastwood's character play against people. And yet he becomes the most sympathetic character because we get to see his family, we get to see his plight, and we get to hear him talk. He almost never stops talking. The next character that we get to meet is Lee Van Cleef's character, known as Angel Eyes, who is the bad, and he is absolutely one of the worst bad guys in terms of doing bad things. The first time we meet him, he looks absolutely sinister and just destroys this family because he's been paid to kill this man for information, but he didn't have to kill the family. He did anyway. And then he goes and immediately kills the guy who hired him because the guy he just killed hired him last minute to kill that guy. It's an insane thing. But in Angel Eyes, we actually get the plot. There's this Union gold that is hidden somewhere, and he knows about it. He's trying to find it, and he just sort of happens to run into these two stupid guys who really want nothing to do with each other, and yet they have to find this gold. And then finally we have Blondie, played by Clint Eastwood, who is the good, and he's the good in as much as he's neither bad nor ugly. He's not a good guy. He cheats people, he kills people wantonly, and he's certainly not nice to people who are ostensibly his friends. And he shows up way far into the movie, like he's our main character, and yet it takes such a long time for us to meet him. But they become all these iconic figures, and so at the end of the film, when it's the three of them, the three-pronged shootout, you're sort of, who do I like? Which one do I want to team up with which other one? It's a great thing. Something that we should never stop talking about with this movie is Ennio Morricone's score. It is one of the greatest scores of all time. Each of the characters has their own musical instrument, sort of like Peter and the Wolf. Blondie has the like a whistle, a pan flute, to signify sort of he is the trickster character. Angel Eyes has a kind of angry sounding guitar, and that is, he's the bad guy. And then Tuco just has a voice. It's just a chorus of people going, ah! The Ecstasy of Gold sequence where Tuco is running through the cemetery at the end is one of the greatest. It's basically a music video. It's one of the first music videos that there could possibly be. It's this man running through this enormous graveyard that they had to build in Spain, by the way. It didn't just exist, and they found it and they decided to shoot in it, with this amazing piece of music behind it. It's astonishingly good. And then the Triello, the final shootout song, which takes such a long time to build up, and this is Leone's whole entire thing, is that the build up to the violence is much more important than the violence itself. All of the shootouts, all of the actual moments of death or violence take almost no time at all, because he's building up all the tension through shots, reverse shot, through the music, through close-ups of people's eyes. And as I leave you here, I could talk about this movie all day, but you're about to see a movie that starts with an amazing wide shot of the Spanish desert, pretending to be the American West. It's a fantastically huge wide shot, interrupted by an ugly man's face just stepping in, and it becoming an amazingly close-up. And that's the kind of subverting of expectation that you're going to get throughout the entirety of this wonderful movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a movie I think nobody can watch and dislike. I think it's one of the most likable movies ever. So sit back, enjoy. I'll toss it back to your host, but one little piece of advice I think will do us all a world of good. Remember, when you have to shoot, don't talk.
Thank you, Kyle. Very insightful. But you're still a jerk for working for Nerdist. Anyway, The Good and the Bad, the Ugly, for me, it is the third in a trilogy, but story-wise it's a prequel. Mm-hmm. It sets up The Man with No Name in the other two Dollars films. It's one of those movies that on face value you're like, okay, Like we said, it's a Western. Got a couple guys in it, okay. But then you get into the nuts and bolts of the story. You have the good, Clint Eastwood's character, Blondie, the man with no name, who is working with the ugly, Tuco, played by Eli Wallach. And they have this scam going where Tuco will get caught for a bounty. And then when they're about to hang him, Blondie will shoot the noose and then they'll get away with the money. And they do that from town to town, from place to place, and until, and each time the bounty gets a little bit higher because he keeps getting away. But then they kind of get to a point where Blondie doesn't want to do it anymore. So he leaves Tuco in the desert. Kind of a dick move. Dick move, Blondie. And Tuco, gets out of it, is able to track him back down, catches up with him, and then he's going to get his revenge. So he takes him into the desert, and he makes him march through the desert for like 100 miles. He's super dehydrated, collapses in the desert, but then they come upon a stagecoach. And in the stagecoach is a bunch of guys in Union uniforms, one of them wearing an eye patch, which is significant for the third part of the story. Come to find out, this is Bill Carson. We've heard about Bill Carson in the film. He tells Tuco about $250,000 in Confederate gold buried in a cemetery. Tuco obviously is enthralled. He's very excited. He gets the name of the cemetery from Bill Carson, but not the name on the grave. And as he's running off to get him some water, he turns around and Blondie is there, and Bill Carson has just died. Turns out Bill Carson tells Blondie the name of the gravestone. So now they both have a piece of the puzzle, and they have to work together. Two enemies. I mean, they're like amicable enemies.
Right.
That's the best part, because throughout the whole movie, they have respect for each other. They don't like each other, and they'd rather just leave the other one for dead. But at the same time, Blondie has so many opportunities to do it, and he won't do it. So then the rest of the film is them working together to find this cemetery so that Tuco's knowledge of where it is and Blondie's knowledge of which grave it is, they can share the $250,000. But then we have to enter the bad. Lee Van Cleef as Angel Eyes. He's a mercenary. He's a bounty hunter. He's after Bill Carson as well. He fulfills a bounty on this first man. And as he's about to kill him, the guy goes, "I will give you $1,000 if you kill the man who hired you." He's like, "All right, cool." Kills that guy, goes back, kills that guy, finds out the name Bill Carson. So then he's looking for Bill Carson, the man with the eye patch, the man who knows what money is. Da-da-da-da-da. They end up meeting up together. Tuco's lying about being Bill Carson. That gets Angel Eyes' attention. He tortures Tuco, gets the name in the cemetery, but he knows Blondie knows the name on the grave, and he knows that Blondie probably won't respond to the torture. So he's like, "All right, Blondie, you're with me. We're going to go." And then the three of them are converging on the cemetery to find this gold. Meanwhile, the Civil War is happening.
What? All of a sudden, the Civil War in this movie?
I know. That one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Tuco and Blondie are walking down the road together, and they're caught off guard by Union soldiers. And then the camera pans to the right, and there's the war.
Yeah.
I read a great review of this movie that Leone is able to restrain any reality within the frame. If you can't see it in the frame, it doesn't exist.
Right.
So that explains why something that ridiculous would happen, where we have a shot right here, and then we pan over and, oh my goodness, what's all that?
And like they wouldn't
Notice
see
it.
Right.
They wouldn't hear cannon fire or bugle horns or anything like that. It's just like, oh wait, what's that?
They do that also at the end when he's running through the field and the cannons are going. He's having the cannon go off, and then all of a sudden, like he just, the cannon goes off and he falls to the left, and the cemetery's there.
Yeah.
And it's
just
like the biggest, greatest, grandest cemetery ever.
How did I miss it?
Right.
Because it wasn't in the frame.
Right.
Intentionally so.
This, just hearing you just say the story, and I'm listening to it, and I know this movie inside and out, so I'm like, I know what you're talking about, but just listening to it, I'm like, there's no way this movie is not the best movie, one of the greatest movies ever.
Yes.
Like it's perfect in terms of just how, the three characters, how they relate to each other, the relationship that they need to form, and that is the reason why, Sergio Leone has this, and he has Once Upon a Time in the West. And for me, those are the two films that I keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
And it may be that Once Upon a Time in the West is the better movie? Maybe, it's arguable. But this is the more important film, and it's all because of, it's right there on the title. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. So most Westerns up to this point, there's a rule of three in American storytelling.
Yep.
And you've got your good guy, you've got your bad guy, and then you've got the woman in between.
Yep.
Right? And the woman is usually either the prostitute with the heart of gold, or it's the school teacher that is here from the East to, join the civilization and the expansion out West. And these, she gets caught up in the middle of this fight. And the hero, the good guy, needs to protect the civilization that she represents from the bad guy, which leads to a showdown. And then the good guy needs to leave. He can't join civilization because he's the good guy that just needs to keep wandering and restoring justice somewhere else. So this movie is interesting because, Blondie is the good. Angel Eyes is the bad, and then you've got this guy Tuco as the ugly. And never before has there been introduced into this Western story this idea of there's shades of gray.
Yeah.
It's either
because
Blondie's
Blondie's not good.
Not innately good. I mean, he's got a code, right?
He has a code.
He has a code that he goes by.
Yeah.
But he will do bad things as long as he doesn't break that code.
Right. For example,
Tuco.
Blondie has the highest kill count.
Yeah.
He kills 11 people in this movie. The bad kills 3.
Right.
So,
but you got to look at.
But he only kills bad
kill?
guys.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
He kills Angel Eyes guys.
Right. Angel Eye kills, like quote unquote innocent people.
Good people.
So with Tuco, there is a limit to the amount of bad that he will do.
Yeah.
But that code is a little wishy-washy with him.
His code is very loose. Yeah.
And then Angel Eyes is just like,
he
no
will
code,
do whatever he needs
merciless,
to.
I will do whatever I need to do to get what I want.
I never realized how smart Tuco is until this viewing because he's obviously the clown of the 3. He's kind of the buffoon. But he's very calculated and he's very forward thinking. Like it doesn't ever seem like he has a plan, but he always kind of has a plan. He has an idea of what he wants to do. It may not be like Blondie where it's like this, this, and this, or Angel Eyes where it's like he just shows up in places and you're like, he's like the scary monster of the movie kind of, where he just appears in places. Like he just shows up in the cemetery and you're like, how did you get here? There's no way you could be here, but he is, and that's why it's cool. And I also never realized how much of it's Tuco's story. Because you think Clint Eastwood, he's on the box, you think this is his movie, but it's really Tuco's story. And then the others kind of weave in and out. There's big chunks of time where we don't see Blondie. And then Angel Eyes starts the movie. Well, Tuco starts the movie actually, but Angel Eyes' story for the most part develops after all the Tuco stuff, and then they're done. But yeah, there's just so much to this movie. It's so well written. The characters are so well defined. These archetypes are embedded into literature and cinema now. You have, so much so that they're parodied in things, they're referenced in stuff all the time. The music is iconic, and anytime you need to have any kind of standoff or duel, you're gonna put in music from this movie. It's just, like you said, I personally haven't seen Once Upon a Time in the West, only because it's 3 hours long and I haven't sat down to watch it. That's my own fault. I'm dumb. I'm sorry. But that movie couldn't happen without this movie.
Right.
Every Western-themed movie after this movie couldn't happen the same way without this movie. And Tarantino wouldn't really exist without Sergio Leone.
Right. And it's even like, it's interesting with the Tarantino thing, like right now it's like he's not even shy about it anymore. Like watch his movie and it's
he's
like,
just directly aping.
Right. To the point where he's even using music.
Yeah. Well, he brought Ennio Morricone out of retirement.
Right. For
Hateful Eight.
Yeah.
Which I didn't like.
Me neither.
Oh, okay. Good.
But like even with stuff like Pulp Fiction, it's like you wouldn't watch Pulp Fiction and say, "Oh, he's ripping off Good, Bad, the Ugly. He's ripping off Sergio Leone." It's now only
unless you knew. Yeah.
unless you knew. It's only until you see this when you're like, "Oh, I get what you're doing."
I mean, Jules and Vincent are some form of archetype of Blondie.
And that's really it's really interesting because there's a part of you that when like when Tarantino hit it was like, oh my God, this original voice and there's nothing else like it, and you love it, and it's it's everything you ever wanted in a movie when you're
16,
19,
12, whatever. Yeah.
And then you watch this and you're like, oh, that's where he that's where he's riffing off of, and that's where he stole it from.
Yep.
And there's a little bit of it that gets diluted, but it's also that's what it is to be a director and a filmmaker. Is you look at these films and you steal a little bit of it, and it's how you use it, it's how you present it. And I would argue that while right now it's a little bit more obvious for Tarantino, but with Pulp Fiction and even something like Jackie Brown or Kill Bill, it's like it's just it's just enough.
Just
like
enough
he puts his stamp on it for sure.
Yeah.
But it's great to be influenced, and there's no better influential film or influential filmmaker than Sergio Leone in this film.
When you watch these movies, can you suspend your disbelief enough to believe that it's the American Southwest, or are you just like, man, Spain is pretty?
Yeah, there's a part of it that's like, it's like, well, this isn't Monument Valley, and there's no getting around that. But I mean, it's so beautiful, and it looks the part.
It looks so amazing.
It's like Eyes Wide Shut. Stanley Kubrick. It's New York City, but it's not New York City because it's London.
Yeah.
And you're like, it feels like New York City, but it's not New York City.
Or anything that's shot in Toronto but supposed to be New York, where you're like, I get it.
It passes.
But you're conveniently shooting this in a way that I don't see the sky because you can't see the sky. But yes, definitely. Lee Van Cleef as Angel Eyes in this movie is interesting because he was previously in For a Few Dollars More as Colonel Mortimer, and he was a good guy in that movie. And then he shows up in The Good, the Bad, the Ugly as a bad guy. Not the same character, also because it's a prequel. So the timey-wimey stuff. But he's so menacing and so terrifying in this film.
And it's just it's those eyes and the mustache and his whole like that V-shaped
angular face he's got.
Leone is really great with faces. There's the guy where Tuco goes in and he gets the gun from him. That guy's face and
is
look.
so comedic and weird. Speaking of that scene, I absolutely love that scene where he's just doing all this weird stuff with the gun.
I don't know what he's doing.
He's not doing anything. He's improvising that entire scene because he didn't know that much about guns. Yeah. What is? That sounds
I'm
good.
listening to the timing of the roly thingy.
He has no idea what he's doing, and he's just BSing through that entire scene, and that's why the shopkeeper's reactions are so genuine, because he's just like, what are you doing? What? And I feel like at any moment he's going to turn to Leone and be like, what is he doing? What's happening right now?
You see, that is a perfect example of what the style of Leone and just the cool factor of these characters. It's like only until I found out that Eli Wallach during that scene asked Leone and was like, what do I do with the gun? He's like, I don't know, just do something. And he doesn't know what the heck he's doing, and he's just doing stuff. But when you're watching it as a 16-year-old kid, you're like, listen to the sound of the gun and how it.
He knows guns so well. He knows what it should sound like. Oh, this one, I don't like this one. And then he takes them apart and puts them back together differently. And that makes you think this guy is a true gunslinger because he builds his own guns. That's what you aspire to, right? In any field of your choice, if it's building cars or being a chef or anything like that, you throw away the recipes, you just put it all in a pile and figure it out. And that's what he does with guns, and you're just like, because we're boys and gunslingers. I will say this: I'm not a gun person. I don't hunt. None of that. But I watch a Western, And damn it, I want a 6-shooter on my hip, and I want to walk around, and I want to twirl it and all that stuff. I actually got to work on a Western, a student film, a couple years ago, and they got replica Colts.
You're like, where's the guns?
Yeah, let me see the gun. And I played with it, and I twirled it around, and I dropped it, and I broke it. I broke the gun. I felt so bad. But at the same time, he kept me there for 2 days. Yep. I had no lines, and I didn't get paid. So it's your fault. You need to give me something to do in this cabin in the woods.
That's perfect. I was, my dad, being in the military, I was definitely raised with guns, but I was raised by a father that was like, you're going to go to the classes, you're going to respect the gun and the cleaning, and you know exactly what this gun is going to do.
It's a tool, yes.
But yeah, it's like, after, like yourself now, like I, am not a gun fan, but you want to go to the gun range and shoot some
revolvers?
Guns? Sure.
Yeah, Colt revolvers or a Winchester rifle.
Right.
It's something about, because they're knights. That's what it is. Gunslingers are the knights of the Western. And it's not just a weapon for them. It's an extension of who they are.
Right.
And you see it in Stephen King's Dark Tower series, and he straight up says that Roland Deschain is based on The Man with No Name. And you're like, duh. If anybody didn't get that from reading The Gunslinger, then you weren't reading the right book, because it's clear on the page. It's right there. And it's just, it's completely impractical. No, any sharpshooter or anything like that would say that these movies are bupkis and whatever, because shooting from the hip like that and from those distances, no, it's not going to work. But it's the movies, it's magic, and it's so cool.
And there's something about the idea of, if you consider yourself everyone struggles to be a good person.
Yeah.
But if you're a good person, you try to live by a code. There's something about the idea that anything that's going to break in or challenge or threaten that code or the people that you love and respect, it's that idea that there is something that you can do that will demolish the evil. Frankly, it is having a gun that you can pick up and shoot the person that is about to shoot you.
Right.
Or shoot the person that is threatening what you are and what you're about and who you love and the people that you want to protect.
Yeah.
And there's something very ingrained in every person that is that need for survival, and also the need for that image of a person on a horse going across an open plain and going towards something. It's like the possibility of order and civilization and idealism, and that is what I think. As much as these spaghetti westerns got into that gray area, and we're not shy about being, there's a reality to how evil the bad guy can be.
Yeah.
There's a reality to how wishy-washy the good person can be, and that middle person, the ugly, can be.
And it's interesting that your dad was leaned more towards the John Wayne, because he is very much the squeaky clean good guy for the most part in his films, except into the later films like The Searchers, where he's a little more like Blondie, where it's like, you're doing some questionable stuff here. It's all in the name of good, but it's not always good. Right. Yeah. That's interesting.
And there is like John Wayne is definitely like the stoic, laconic, the silent level of goodness that will protect. And as my dad said to me, that doesn't exist. Yeah. That doesn't work in real life.
In real life, you have to be more like Blondie.
But another thing about this movie that is great, and there's interviews with Clint Eastwood where he talks about this, where he's like, he talks about Sergio Leone and working, and it's like, he'd be on the set and he'd say, you can't have a frame where you see the gun fire and you see the person that is about to get shot in the same frame. Like that just didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I never even thought about that. But he's like, you're breaking you can't, you can't do that. And he's like, why not? That's what I want to see. Yeah. And Clint Eastwood always, because he's the American kind of being invited into this new world of Italian cinema and the spaghetti Western, he was just kind of looking around and being like, wow, like this is so different. And it's interesting that this is how you see life and this is how you see the world, because I come from the American Westerns where they just don't do that.
Yeah.
And he's even like, he's quick to say, like, with Leone, he'll take a sequence that should be 2 minutes and make it 10 minutes.
Yeah. Like the ending.
And extend
the standoff in
everything.
the cemetery. And you get to see every little angle. You get to see every little nuance of how their eyes are moving and where their hands are and reaching for that gun so slowly. And he's the master of building tension.
Right.
Because like you say, you could take something that should be shot, reverse shot, like I'm going to shoot you, you're going to fall down, and you're going to die. Instead, it's going to be a shot, then it's going to be another shot of the same thing, and it's going to be my hand, or I'm going to shoot 3 times so you can see it 3 different times, and then show you falling all 3 times somehow. And our brains just accept it like, you got shot 3 times.
Howard Hawks, who is one of the great American filmmakers, who made Rio Bravo and Red River, no stranger to the American Western, joked that in the time that it takes Sergio Leone to kill 2 people, that he would kill 20 people. And there is a point, like during the Civil War sequence, where there's a whole section where it's just like cannon, 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 different angles, cannon, cannon, exploding, exploding. There's a point where I'm just like, I get it. Yeah, the cannon, it's awesome.
Look at all these cannons.
Jesus.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, but at the same time, you're just like,
such an interesting,
right? Like you're never
and exciting way.
You're just like,
like he's doing these dramatic zooms and zooms out and all of this stuff, and it's just cannon fire.
Yep.
And you know that they had a couple cannons, and they're like, all right, we're gonna shoot off some cannons. Everybody get ready. We're gonna film it in a bunch of different ways. And they probably spent 2 or 3 hours just filming cannons,
right,
so that they could cut it together and make a minute, maybe. This is the sign of a great filmmaker, and it goes in line with a lot of the other people that we've already talked about, where they just have a vision, and they're so laser-sighted on that vision that they're going to get it. And it's not going to make any sense when you're shooting it. It's like Kubrick. You're like, what are we doing?
And
this
then you
is
watch it and go,
nuts.
oh.
And then you watch it and you go, okay, I did not see that coming.
There's also like this movie, like Lawrence of Arabia, and like this is a true, like the word epic was invented for a film like this.
Yes.
And there's a point during that Civil War sequence. One, like you feel like you've been watching this movie forever, and then all of a sudden you get this Civil War sequence, and you're just like, oh my God, I had no idea this was going to happen.
And it's a new movie.
And it's a new movie, and just the look, like, how did they get so many people and so much
extras.
set?
And that bridge was a real bridge.
And they blew it up.
That the Spanish army built.
Yep.
And one of my favorite stories about this movie is that they had to blow it up twice. They rig it up to explode. This was a Italian, Spanish, West German, and American co-production. This was common of spaghetti westerns at the time. And on the crew, you would have people who spoke Italian, you'd have people who spoke Spanish, and you had people who spoke English. And a lot of times, the wires got crossed and they couldn't communicate with each other. So the Spanish army rigs up the explosions on this bridge. And Leone tells the guy, all right, when I say go, go. And over the radio, another crew member says go to something else. He's like, all right, let's go. The Spanish captain hears that, ka-ching, kaboom, blows up the bridge. They weren't ready. None of the cameras were rolling. Leone is so mad.
Can you imagine being Leone at that moment?
No. I can't. I think about it now, and I can't.
Right?
It's just, I've had small things happen on sets that I freak out about, but blowing up an entire bridge with real dynamite, I would lose my mind. So he fires the guy, he drives off set. The captain is very apologetic because it's a language barrier. He said "vai," which is go, but he wasn't saying go to him. So he's like, "Oh, go, boom."
Right.
So he's like, okay, we will rebuild the bridge. You go do something else, go shoot some other stuff. So they went and shot some other stuff. And he said, we will rebuild the bridge on the condition that you hire that guy back, because it wasn't his fault. So Leone gets the guy back, rehires him back onto the crew. They shoot a bunch of stuff. They re-rig the bridge. They rebuild the bridge and re-rig it. And then they shoot it again. And they get that amazing explosion, which very nearly killed Clint Eastwood. So they'd go and they dive behind those sandbags. And Eli Wallach's got his butt up in the air like a ridiculous person. And when it blows, a giant rock lands on the sandbags. Like, here's Eastwood's head. That close to him. Horrible accident. Clint Eastwood has been killed in this film in Italy, or in Spain. But misses him by that much. Eli Wallach almost died as well. In the train sequence where he breaks the handcuffs off, he puts the big monster guy down. After he's killed him on a rock, he puts him on the train track, and he's lying there waiting for the train to go by. And it seems odd that he stays laying down for so long after the chain breaks. And it's a happy accident that he did, because if you watch it slowly, you can see that right over the top of his head are the steps of one of the train cars. And had he lifted his head up, he would have been decapitated. And to think that it was just like, whoo,
Right.
dodge that one. And you're like, oh, what? Huh?
Yeah.
Eli Wallach had 9 lives on this movie. He had some bad stuff happen to him.
What's also crazy about this movie and Italian cinema in general, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about 2 Italian masterpieces, and I don't think we've ever talked about the fact that they just don't record sound.
No.
And you think about a movie like this, they didn't record sound.
For all of this.
Anything.
None of it.
You know, you get like, okay, yeah, you're going to add in the sound effects and the guns and
the
all
Foley
that stuff.
and all that other stuff that you do in movies.
But all the dialogue and everything that is, I mean, it's just, I don't know how you make a movie and then you essentially have to record the whole movie again.
Especially, and this is something that always used to bother me about older movies, especially foreign films. You'll notice that the sync is off in this movie, and that is because it is post-dubbed. But also, especially in the scene with Tuco and his brother, the friar, that actor is Italian, and he's speaking Italian.
Right.
And Eli Wallach is speaking English. And he said that was one of the more difficult scenes in the film, because it's a very emotional scene too, because it's all about his past, and we're learning so much about Tuco. And you know, he left because things were so bad, and the brother thinks he's so great, but he left before the bandit did, and all this other stuff. But they're speaking completely different languages to each other. And there are other scenes with Lee Van Cleef and some of the soldiers where they come up and they're speaking German. And you can tell, if you really watch and you know that it's happening, because he's just kind of staring at him until he stops talking, and then he's like, okay, my turn to talk now. And that's how they had to do it, because it's like, I'm going to talk at you, you're not going to understand, but you're going to get from my mannerisms and my performance what I mean. And then when I stop talking, it's your turn. And then they just re-recorded it in English and Italian and every other language as well.
As an actor, Lincoln, how?
I would lose it. I would freak out. I'd be like, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. Except, what were we watching? One of the films that we were talking about, oh, it was The Searchers, when you were saying that his performance is almost like sign language.
Right.
So that it could be understood. They didn't do that in this movie. It's very natural. It's not showy. Some of the deaths are, you know, the way people die in Leone movies is always funny, because it's like you get shot and you spin like a top and you fall over and break a table or whatever. But to just think about trying to have a good performance in a film where you don't know what your scene partner is saying to you, you have an idea, you read the script, but literally we're not communicating with each other. Would be so difficult. And actually, I worked on a film once where the director and the crew all spoke Spanish. And I just had this little walk-on part where I was standing by a car. I like walk up to a car and somebody turns around and threatens me and I'm just like, and then I run away. I don't know if the movie ever finished getting made or whatever. But on that set, the director kept forgetting that I didn't speak Spanish. So he would turn to me, he would be giving some direction to the crew or one of the other actors, and he would turn to me and continue his thought and be like, and then you're going to do all that, but it was all in Spanish. And I know just enough Spanish that I got the gist of it, but it was funny because I'm sitting there looking at him, and I'm sure I just had this look of like, and then the AD like tapped and goes, he doesn't speak Spanish. And he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I keep forgetting. And I was like, I think I got it, but that would be the whole film. Like, Sergio Leone didn't speak much English. So he and Eli Wallach actually communicated with each other in French.
Right.
And then Eastwood's over there being like, give me another Ferrari and I'll think about it.
Right.
Ugh. Hearing about
He's like,
how
all right,
he
I
is,
just chew on my cigar.
hearing about how he was in these movies kind of makes me, it kind of sours his image to me.
Clint?
Which is, yeah, just kind of a bummer. Because like he was very, he was doing Rawhide in the States. And he ended up getting $250,000 just to do the film, 10% of the North American profits, and a Ferrari, just to do the movie. It's like, come on, really? And then he had a bad relationship with Leone, and they never worked together again after this. It's just, he seemed like kind of a... And now look at him. He's an old crypt keeper yelling at chairs.
He's supposed to live on the screen.
Yeah. He needs to live on the screen.
In terms of this being a trilogy,
Yeah.
So pretty loose in terms of this is a film that can, unlike most trilogies, this is a film that can stand alone.
Yes.
And that's fine. If you don't know it's part of a trilogy, you're not going to lose or miss anything.
It's not like watching Return of the Jedi and being like, who?
Right. Or like, it's like, it would be nice if you could, like Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
It's your favorite, my favorite, everybody's favorite.
Yep. Everybody who has any sense.
Right? It would be nice if it would just, if that could just be kind of like almost like a standalone film.
Yep.
But you've got to know what happened in Star Wars, and you've got to know that
There's some conclusion in Jedi.
yes, so that
Otherwise,
it's not
it's
that
a
much of a
downer.
bummer.
And you're just like, you killed Han, and you put him in carbonite.
Same thing with like Two Towers is my favorite of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's like it would be nice if that could stand alone, but it just can't. The only other trilogy up to this point when this came out that was loose in this way is John Ford had his Calvary trilogy, and they were pretty much like separate films that form this kind of loose
Universe. Yeah.
But I think, it's great that one, he did this and he's revisiting this man with no name character, but it is its own story.
Yeah.
The characters are their own characters, and it doesn't exist in like this bubble where you have to know such and such happened before, or such and such is going to happen after.
Yeah.
You can just watch this movie and you're like, all right, that's it.
Yeah.
This is a masterpiece, and that's how
And
it's gonna
without
stay.
knowing that it's meant to be a prequel, the only things that allude to that are the man with no name acquiring the hat and acquiring the poncho. That's it.
Right.
Nothing else applies to the other films. It's set before them, and Blondie becomes Joe. That's it. And it kind of makes you want to go, George Lucas, this is how you do a prequel. You don't have to over-explain things. You just have little hints of like, here's your breadcrumb trail to New Hope, instead of being like, I'm going to change it all. Midichlorians. Still.
That's Lincoln.
I hate midichlorians.
But we love the good and bad. The ugly.
Yeah, dude. I really appreciate the anti-war viewpoint in this film too, because in a way, this is almost a satire of Westerns and war films and that kind of stuff, because our two lead characters, Blondie and Tuco, abhor the war that's happening around them. And it's literally like always present. There's always something about the war around them. And it's never romanticized. It's never glorified in any way. It's always, this is an awful, stupid thing that's happening. So much so that he has the line, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's, what an awful waste of life.
Right.
When they're at the Union camp on the side of the river. And it's just like, what are we doing? You're fighting over a bridge.
Right.
And then they're like, hey, they're fighting over a bridge.
And you
Boom.
get, what's great is that you get that sense of cynicism even from the captain.
Yeah.
Who, you know, there's a beautiful moment with Clint Eastwood and the dying soldier when he gives him the cigarette. You know, it's that sense of like, you know, I don't believe in anything that you may or may not believe in, and I hate that you are dying because of whatever you were led to believe.
Yeah.
But for God's sakes, you know, have this,
one last pleasure.
and then there's even like a lovely moment between the captain and Clint Eastwood when he dies, and it, you know, again, it's that sense of Leone knowing the reality of things, and that not everything is black and white, not everything is good and bad, that there are shades of gray to everything, and that his wanting to take this genre and open it up in such a way and show that, and at every stage of it, it does it. Even in you know, when Tuco is in the bathtub. If you're gonna shoot, don't talk.
Improvise! Again, some of the best lines in cinema are improvised. Actors.
But again, I mean, that is not something that the hero of a Western would do.
No.
It's something that a real person trying to survive and doing whatever he can do to survive, to not be the other guy, would do. And then he comes out and Blondie joins them, and they know that they have to work together because, you know, them together are not as bad as Angel Eyes. He's the real threat. And that again, every step of the way, even when they hate each other or despise each other or are going to, you know, rob each other blind, at the end of the day, they do have to work together. Even at the end, when they're in the showdown, it looks like every man for himself.
Supplies. Blondie had a plan the whole time. The forward thinking of Blondie is insane. The climax of the film is determined in the second act by his actions.
And that is the difference. You know,
such good screenwriting.
You said that Tuco was that he is smart, but he's smart up to a point. Like, you know, he will get himself in so much trouble, but he knows he's smart enough to get himself out of trouble.
Right.
No matter what, you know, even when he's being tortured, it's like, you know, I have to survive this, but then I know exactly what I need to do in order to not be that other guy. And Blondie is more, you know, he's the kind of the chess player. And he will think a couple moves ahead so that he's not going to be the guy that gets tortured. Because...
And he's such the chess player that Angel Eyes knows that. He knows he can torture information out of Tuco. He flat out says, I know torturing you is not going to do any good. So I'm just going to ask you, and I'm going to make you show me. Because, you know, getting him beat up and sticking his thumbs in his eyes and all that other stuff that he does to Tuco, Blondie's just going to take it. Because he has a plan. He knows how to get out of it. And even in those moments where a normal person would just be like, hope is lost, I don't know what to do, and they end up at, what's the name of the prison camp? Oh, it's not Andersonville, it's Batterville. When they end up there, they're both already figuring out how they're going to get out. It's almost like a video game where it's like, okay, this is the next stage. And then as soon as the cutscene's done, we got to find that secret panel. We got to find that passageway. And they're always thinking ahead. And I think Blondie, as soon as he sees the soldiers and realizes that they're Union, not Confederate, he's already wheels spinning, gears turning. How am I going to get out of this? Whereas Tuco's probably like, uh-oh.
Right.
And that's the difference between their two mindsets.
Mentioning the prison, I cannot not talk about this, the torturing of Tuco.
To that song.
And the song. And the guy that's playing the fiddle, and he stops playing the fiddle, and then he's
play that
forced to
fiddle.
play the fiddle. And it's such like that song and that moment with the fiddle player is what makes that scene even more terrible.
Because nobody wants it to happen.
Right.
Nobody.
And it's just that is
There are
genius
no
filmmaking.
good guys in that scene. There are no bad guys in that scene besides Angel Eyes. Everybody sympathizes with Tuco because they know exactly what's happening in there. And it's horrible. And it's awful. Oh, and I really appreciate the historical accuracy of this film, or at least the lengths that he went to make it accurate. There are a few things that are inaccurate. For example, dynamite didn't exist yet. I didn't know that. Why not? Blow up a bridge. Oh, dynamite hasn't been invented.
And he's like, shut up.
Go home. You're fired. But Batterville is based on Andersonville and other Civil War camps at the time. So they did their research. He read his books. He knows the American West so well that it's almost a history lesson.
Right.
And I kind of like to think of it like that. It's like, all right, I'm gonna watch some history. It's fiction, sure, but this is what it was like.
And it's an outsider's view of American iconography and American history and American storytelling, really. And I think it's strange. There's different films that are like this, where it's like it's a completely American story told from a European's point of view, and somehow there's something about that outsider's viewpoint that sees us and sees
the forest for the trees is what it is, because we grow up in American history class and learning about all this stuff, and then you get to college and you realize, hey, all that stuff you learned in grade school, that's all crap.
Right.
That's a bunch of lies.
There's something about the rose-colored glasses comes off whenever a European comes and takes.
And they've just been observing us for our entire existence. We're one of the newer nations in the world, and you see it when a new nation gets to be sovereignty or whatever. You're just sitting there going, all right, what are you guys going to do over there? And they've been watching us. They've been watching what we've been doing to the Native Americans. They watched what we did to African Americans. They watched how the Civil War went down. They, all of this stuff. So for somebody to come along and say, yeah, I'm going to tell an American Civil War story, for you to be like, how dare you? It's like, oh, actually, you probably have a better perspective than I do. Please. How did it go down? And then you see it like this, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's
And it's
awful.
interesting.
And it's such a good point of view.
We'd be remiss, even though Mr. Blondie, Clint Eastwood, maybe was not the best behind the scenes, but his portrayal of the man with no name is so iconic, and resonates throughout cinema history. There are versions of the man with no name
All over the place.
all over the place. Steve McQueen, Paul Newman,
Kane from Kung Fu.
Yep.
The Bride from
The Bride.
Tarantino.
Yep. Even something like
Marty
Ryan Gosling.
McFly in Back to the Future 3.
Right? I mean, come on! Don't you see it?
My second favorite Back to the Future.
Ryan Gosling in Drive.
Yeah.
He created this persona where it's all look and style, and it's not. He doesn't say much. Even when he does talk, it's like a few quick things. But he just gets so much out of so little, and he's got such a presence, and he's just so damn cool.
There are two types of men: men with guns and men who dig. You dig.
My favorite is get your drawers on and let's go.
There's so much communicated in that line.
Right?
It's like, well, you know what we need to do, so just put your pants on and let's get out of here. We have to talk about the score because this is Morricone's masterpiece. He has a theme for the film and for each of the three leads. Tuco's is the doo-doo-doo-doo on flute. No, right? I think I'm mixing up the order. It's flute, ocarina, and vocals.
Okay.
And maybe Blondie's. I think Angel Eyes, I think, is the flute.
Mm-hmm.
Blondie is the ocarina, and I think Tuco is the voices. And there's like a mix of Coyote Howl in there too. Coyote Howl! In a score! Oh, and it culminates so beautifully in the trio in the cemetery with the eyes and the standoff and everything. It's that scene is so simple, and if you take out that score, that scene would be unwatchable.
Right.
You'd be like, get to the point. Stop showing me hands. Stop showing me eyes. I get it. There's three of them. Somebody shoot somebody. But you put that music under there.
On the Morricone.
Oh. And then all of a sudden, I've seen this movie, I don't know how many times. 12 times. Easy. We get to that scene. I'm watching it at my computer. I'm sitting at my desk. I have a cat. Because I can never not have a cat. And I'm just like, I start leaning forward. I start leaning towards the screen as that's happening. And I'm just like, and eventually she gets down because I'm squishing her. I'm like, sorry. But then we get to it. And it's not even, you don't even want the payoff. You just want that score to keep happening. Just keep playing this beautiful music.
But also, it's like somehow you forget what happens.
Yeah. You're still like, what's going to happen?
You get it to it and you're just like, wait a minute. I think, yeah. Does Blondie shoot first? No, Tuco doesn't shoot because he doesn't have bullets in the gun because Blondie took the bullets out.
But you forgot that.
But somehow you forget that.
You forget it because he draws. Oh, you bastard! Oh my!
Eli Wallach.
Who'd have thought?
So funny.
Who would have thought? He basically got the part because of now I can't remember the movie. It's a railroad scene in I can't think of the movie. Morricone saw him in something, and he's like, you would be perfect for Tuco. And Wallach almost turned it down because he's like, it's very similar to the role that I already played, so I don't know if I want to do that. But he ultimately took the part and just steals this movie. He is so unbelievably good.
And it's somewhat of a comedic performance.
Yeah.
The way that he plays it. I mean, every scene just has just great bits of business that he does, and
especially because Van Cleef and Eastwood are very statuesque.
Yep.
They're just trees of right and wrong, and then he just kind of pinballs back and forth.
all over the place. Yeah.
Everything that he does is done with like 3/4 of enough intelligence, and 3/4 of enough ambition. Like he's a Mexican bandit, so he's Catholic, but even when he does the sign of the cross, he doesn't do it right.
Right. It's like kind of haphazard.
He's like, I had something. Yeah. Everything he does is like, close enough. The guns, close enough. He doesn't wear a holster, which plays so well for the character that he just keeps it in his pocket. Because you see that and you're like, what are you going to do? And then he draws it on you and then, how? He's such a buffoon that you lose any threat from him in his buffoonery.
Yep.
And I love that he kept the gun in his pocket because he couldn't put it in a holster without looking at it.
Right.
So Morricone's like, well, all right, let's just put it on a lanyard and keep it in your pocket. And he wanted him to do a thing where he like flicked his neck in such a way that it would like pop out of his pocket into his hand. And Wallach was like, I don't know what you mean. Will you show me? So he's like, all right. He puts the lanyard on. He tries to do it, and he misses his hand and hits himself in the crotch with the gun. He's just like, all right, just put it in your pocket. Okay, we got it. Oh, it just tickles me.
I mean, even with the blowing up the bridge, like you mentioned, he ducks down and he's got his ass sticking up.
What's that going to do? You're still going to get hit by something, and then.
But he's Looney Tunes.
When he just kicks him. That's two actors on set who work well together, because Eli Wallach just jumped down and did that, and it was silly, and he probably got the yes, do that. That looks good. And Eastwood looks at him. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. You're not even behind this. Whatever. But then as soon as the dust settles and it's all clear, the next thing is, all right, as soon as the dust settles, you get up and you walk away. And Eastwood goes, I'm going to kick you then. And he just knocks him over. And it's just those little moments in these movies are what solidify them as great performances and great films. When the actors themselves can settle into their roles so well that they can have those little moments with each other.
And they're, we talked about this with Jaws. It's like they're allowed to be people.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to have little bits of business and little moments between each other that are real and add to the flavor and the, all the grandiose stuff that's happening around them. This is still a Western.
Yeah.
But somehow it's like, oh, I know someone like Eli Wallach.
Yeah.
I know an Angel Eyes. I know, hopefully not. Like it's like The Man with No Name. Like I know a silent type like that.
Yeah.
And I know the person that would
kick you over
like
rather
that.
than to be like, hey, let's go. They're just going to knock you over and then walk away. I have some trivia.
Great.
While we wrap up here. In the scene where Angel Eyes slaps Maria, the prostitute, Lee Van Cleef refused to do it. He's like, I won't slap a woman. I won't do it. And she's like, no, it's fine. I'm an actress. Just do it. And he's like, no, I won't do it. So they ended up having to do a stunt double to slap her. So in his shots, he's just missing. But then when she's being slapped, that's a double. And he said, he's quoted as saying, there's two things that I live by. One of them is I don't kick dogs. The other is I don't slap women in movies. And I thought that was a great quote. And then I thought about it in a little bit, and I was like, why did you say in movies?
Lee Van Cleef.
That makes me nervous. We've mentioned the standoff scene in the cemetery. We only see, I guess we see all three of their hands, but we really see Angel Eyes slowly creeping towards his gun. And I always thought it was interesting that he's missing the end of his middle finger. Turns out that was a hand double. Lee Van Cleef's had all of his fingers, and I just thought that's like, really, you couldn't find a hand double that actually had all of his fingers? That seems silly.
Or is that something about his character in terms of like, did he get chopped off somehow?
Well, and I thought it was just like, oh, that's interesting that, something happened to Lee Van Cleef in his life, but it didn't.
Stunt double. I want a person missing a finger.
I think he was just like, Hefe, come here, do this, whatever. There's no dialogue for the first 10.5 minutes of this movie. Can you imagine trying to pitch a script to a studio?
No.
Be like, by the way, there's no dialogue for the first 10 minutes. They'd be like, all right, you can go. Thanks for coming in.
I had this little every time I start a script, and it worked out with Northland, but every time I start one, I'm like, okay, how many pages can I get?
With no dialogue.
With no dialogue. It's so hard.
Yeah.
So hard.
It's a fun improv exercise, actually, to go out and just do emotion. Let somebody just go out and they're doing this. And you're like, all right. Give them a few seconds to do that. And then you come out, and as the other character, you observe them doing that motion. And then you let that inform what the scene is about. Rather than coming out and being like, I'm a fishmonger, have a fish. It's like, what is this? What are you doing? You twisting? You turning? Are you Charlie Chaplin in modern times? Yeah, I talk too much in both life and my writing, so that would be a good challenge for me too. Actually, after watching Modern Times, I want to make a silent film. I want to just write a very simple story that doesn't need any dialogue, doesn't need to be like, underscored by piano, but just no dialogue. And I tried. That's why, actually, what Kent did, it starts like that, with no dialogue, because I just wanted to have the atmosphere and to set it up like that. And then, you know what it was missing? It was missing Eli Wallach jumping through a window with a bunch of food in his mouth.
Right.
Next time, what Kent did too, he had a sandwich.
Action. We need action. And that's the thing, it's the purest form of cinema. Because back then, that's all, they didn't have sound, they didn't have recording, so I mean, it's like, there is a way to tell your story without it. And we'll nail it someday, I swear.
Yeah, we'll get it. This is currently the highest rated film on IMDb without an Oscar nomination, which is atrocious. How this movie didn't get cinematography or score or anything is ridiculous. Because how many, Best Picture winners are there that you don't remember? Just like, oh, this movie got snubbed from this movie, and you're like, that really? Okay. But this one outlived that one so much. This one has outlived so many films and is at the top of so many people's lists, and it didn't even get a nomination. That's ridiculous. Let's see. Clint Eastwood did not like the final cut of the film. He thought Tuco's part was much bigger than his, which again, I'm like, shut up, Eastwood. In the cemetery scene, when he opens up the grave of Arch Stanton, that skeleton in there is an actual human skeleton. It was the body of a Spanish actress.
It was the guy that blew up the bridge.
Sorry, Jerry. She had in her will that she wanted her body to act on even in death. So they're like, all right, here you go. This is a funny connecting of the universes thing. In the beginning of the film, when Tuco is first caught for the bounty and they unroll the wanted poster, it says Guy Calloway, presumably one of his aliases. For a few dollars more, Colonel Mortimer, Van Cleef's character, is searching for Guy Calloway. And it's like, aha, that's a nice little touch, because unless you know that from the film, it's not, ha ha ha. Yeah. It's like, hey, that's a fun connection. And as I mentioned, the kill count, Blondie kills 11, Tuco kills 6, and Angel Eyes only kills 3. But before we go, we have to talk about the cemetery scene for 1 second. Because if you look up this movie anywhere, you can find the latitude and longitude of that cemetery, because the Spanish army, again, built that cemetery. And if you're ever in Spain, out in the mountains, you can go to that spot. And the graves are all gone, but there's like a marker there of like, this is where the film Good, Bad, and the Ugly was shot. They dug 1,500 graves out there, just in the middle of, a valley for this scene. The scope of this movie is ridiculous. And for it not to be a big steaming turd, here again, same with Star Wars, same with Jaws, the fact that this movie didn't tank and didn't just blow up on itself is a testament to Leone, to the actors, and in my mind, this movie would not matter without Marconi's score.
And that it continues to endure, it continues to entertain, it continues to inspire, it continues to, educate in terms of, filmmakers and film historians looking back on a piece of filmmaking and figuring out how it works and why it works. The greatest compliment I can give to this film is that if you're ever in a spot where you're like, I don't know if you're not feeling creative or you're not feeling like, what you can offer is going to be good enough, watch this movie and I swear to God, you're going to get inspired and you're going to get, influenced and you're going to get excited and just, you're going to get the creative juices are just going to start flowing and it's just infectious.
Do you want to hear how right you are? I watched this and then I started working on a new script. It's true. It'll do it for you. You can watch it in the usual places, $3. But I highly recommend buying the DVD because, make this a Fathom event. Fathom, please?
Good, Bad, the Ugly?
Please. I want to watch this on the big screen so badly.
I was 64? 64 or 65?
6.
6?
The year.
Okay.
Yeah. Because a few dollars was 64. Fistful of Dollars, 64. A few dollars more, 65. This was 66. But all 3 of them were released in the States in 67.
Okay.
Yeah.
trying to do the math and figure out how many years it's been.
40 and another 10, 20, 60.
Do a Fathom event.
Please. We'll host it.
This
so that
has
is
more stills inside.
Oh, beautiful. And there's so much like cool fan art and everything else that's come out about this movie. It's just, it is art in cinema, and I love it to pieces. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, thank you for putting it on the schedule. David.
One of the top 5 Westerns, easily.
Oh, number 1 for me with a bullet. Get it? Because it's a Western. Next week, we are doing Francois Truffaut's 400 Blows, which will be exciting to discuss. My first of his films. So I'm excited to see that, and be the first time I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Truffaut.
All right.
Perfect.
I think that's all we got.
Thank you to Kyle.
Yes, thank you, Kyle. You should check out his writings. Follow him on Twitter @FunctionalNerd. He abandoned Facebook, so follow him on Twitter. He's very funny. And he also hosts a bunch of stuff through Nerdist too, so you should check that out. Mostly horror themed. And he's the official Doctor Who guy of Nerdist, so if you're a Doctor Who fan, you should follow his stuff.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, until next time, I'm Lincoln L. Hayes.
I am David Metzger.
Thank you for watching and listening to Vermont Film Essentials.